Guys, today Bungie just dropped the Season 21 Abilities Tuning Preview. We're going to break it all down here in today's video. As always, if you're going to enjoy the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, as there's a lot of you guys who watch my content that haven't subscribed. So if you could do that, that'd be greatly appreciated, as it really helps me out a lot here on YouTube. Let's just dive right into this ability tuning article. With Season 21's Ability Tuning Pass, these are our high-level goals. Increase viability of roaming supers in high-difficulty PvE content, incorporate subclass keywords into a selection of light subclass supers, reduce the amount of unlimited uptime mobility availability in the Crucible, and increase build crafting capabilities of a selection of stasis and light subclass aspects. So, fragment budget review. Increased fragment slot allotment of the following aspects from 1 to 2. Hunters, Trappers Ambush, Shutter Dive, and Gunpowder Gamble. Titan, Bastion, Juggernaut, and for Warlock, Chaos Accelerant. This now means that they will provide 2 fragment slots instead of 1, which is very good to see. Next, all supers increase PvE damage resistance by 20%. This is for roaming supers, which is very good indeed. Hunters, Golden Gun, both Marksman and Deadshot increase PvE damage by 20%, and Arc Staff increase PvE damage by 20% as well. Spectral Blades increase PvE damage by 35%. Heavy Attack now weakens targets on hit, and fixed an issue causing some right-hand Spectral Blades attacks to fail to connect when attacking at maximum attack speed. Gathering Storm, direct impact damage versus players increased from 200 to 300. Delayed lightning strike damage versus players increased from 300 to 500. Lingering lightning tick damage versus players increased from 40 to 60, and now deals increased damage versus Wall of Radiance and Ward of Dawn. Next here for Titans, Fist of Havoc, light attack cost reduced from 8.5% to 6%. Heavy attack cost reduced from 18 to 12%. Increased heavy attack PvE damage by 33%, and heavy attack now blinds targets near the center of the slam area. Glacial Quake increased Shiver Strike thrust speed while in super by 10%, and increased light attack damage by 20%. For Sentinel increased PvE damage by 20%. Hammer of Soul increased PvE damage by 10%. Burning Maul increased PvE damage by 10%, now creates a sunspot on cast when Soul Invictus is equipped, matching the behavior of Hammer of Soul, and Heavy Attack Cyclones now applies Scorch over time. Warlocks, Nova Warp increased PvE damage by 15%, a fully charged attack now makes enemies volatile on hit, and Nova Bomb PvE damage increased by 20%. Stormcaller increased damage in PvE by 25%, damage ramp up while attacking now occurs more quickly, over 3 seconds down from 5, Landfall Detonation and Seekers now jolt targets, Chaos Reach increased PvE damage by 25%, sustained damage on a single target now creates a jolting lightning strike at the target's location, increased damage resistance versus players from 40% to 50%, increased maximum strafe speed from 3.5 meters per second to 4.5 meters per second, I'm guessing that's what that means, adjusting super camera to avoid the player's body blocking view of targets when strafing. Winter's Wrath increased PvE damage by 10%, and Daybreak adjusted super camera to allow the player to look down further and avoid VFX blocking view of targets when moving quickly. Next, Strand updates. For Hunters, Threaded Spike increased projectile travel range before being returned to the player by 30%, increased damage versus PvE combatants by roughly 55%, slightly reduced speed of the dart as it returns to players to make catching it easier, increased energy gained from catching the dart based on the number of enemies hit, now pierces Cabal Phalanx shields, and no longer prioritizes the catch action over the grapple melee if an enemy target is within grapple melee range. Titan, Frenzied Blade, decreased cooldown based on how many melee charges the player has stored. At 0 charges, cooldown reduced by 15%. At 2 charges, cooldown reduced by 30%. Warlock Arcane Needle, decreased cooldown based on how many melee charges the player has stored. At 0 charges, cooldown reduced by 15%. At 2 charges, cooldown reduced by 30%. Now increases speed based on the projectile's flight time. Initial velocity increased to 40 meters per second, up from 30, and final velocity increased to 70 meters per second, up from 60. Increased projectile tracking strength by roughly 10%. Grapple reduced base cooldown from 105 seconds to 82, and reduced the minimum time between activation from 2.5 to 0.2 seconds. Thread of Generation reduced energy generation provided by some damage over time mechanics, and reduced energy generation provided by trace rifles by 36%. Now we move on to stasis tuning updates. Hunter Withering Blade increased projectile tracking, search range on bounce versus players by 20%, increased maximum tracking strength by 12.5%. Titan Shiver Strike, maximum thrust while in flight increased by 16%, decreased maximum downward influence of gravity while in flight by 18%. Howl of the Storm increased width of freezing cone versus players by 31%, and Warlock's Frost Pulse now provides 2 meters of additional melee lunge range after activation for 1.2 seconds. Now for the light-based subclass tuning updates. For the Titan, Seismic Strike, Shield Bash, and Hammer Strike now cost 15% melee energy on activation, whether or not you hit a target, and based cooldowns are now standardized at 91 seconds, previously ranged from 101 seconds to 114 seconds. Knockout lunge range reduced from 6.5 meters to 5.5 meters, and uncharged melee PvE damage bonus increased from 60% to 100%. Shield Throw increased base impact damage from 60 to 70, increased consistency of finding and adjusting initial trajectory toward a new target after a bounce, and Throwing Hammer now adjusts its initial flight trajectory based on your aim assist target. Soul Invictus increased damage dealt by sunspots to enemy players per tick from 17 to 22. Hunter's Snare Bomb increased PvE weakened duration on detonation from 4 to 8 seconds. Proximity Knife detonation damage versus players reduced from 105 to 90. Impact damage versus players increased from 14 to 20. Weighted Throwing Knife on mouse and keyboard reduced minimum tracking shape size by 25% and maximum tracking shape size by 10%. This shape grows over 0.5 seconds after the projectile is thrown. Lightweight Knife projectile speed increased from 30 meters per second to 40, and tracking shape size increased by 20%. In addition, Gunpowder Gamble reduced base cooldown from 12 to 6 seconds. Warlocks now, Incinerator Snap fixed an issue preventing the secondary projectile arming shape from activating. Total damage versus players reduced from 150 to 135 to compensate for drastically increased consistency. Ball Lightning increased PvE damage by 30%, reduced ping scaler on both primary and secondary detonations, so combatants are less likely to be knocked out of the secondary strike area while the player is amplified. Chaos Accelerant Scatter Grenade increased tracking consistency of charged scatter grenade submunitions, increased submunition arming duration, fixed an issue where some submunitions were impacting the ground on creation in some situations, resulting in an early detonation, and Magnetic Grenade or Handheld Supernova increased charge time from 3.2 seconds to 4.5 seconds. Lightning Surge fixed an issue allowing Lightning Surge to deal more instances of secondary strike damage than intended. Now targets can take a maximum of 2 instances of damage from a single activation of the ability, one from the primary lightning strike around the player and one from the secondary lightning strike. This change necessitates some changes in damage values, but in general its damage output should be significantly more consistent and slightly higher than the intended value previously, but without the ability to one-shot a single enemy guardian from full health. Now, subclass keyword tuning. Scorch increased stun time before stacks begin falling off from 1.5 seconds to 2.3 seconds on a player, and increased stun time before the stacks begin falling off from 3 seconds to 4.5 seconds on PvE combatants. Jolt reduced base PvE damage by 15% and reduced additional damage scalar versus major combatants in PvE by roughly 20%. Speed Booster finally, boost jump acceleration scalar reduced from 1.5x to 1.25x. Now activations while sprinting after 2.5 seconds down from 3 seconds. Now lingers while the player is not sprinting for 2 seconds up from 1.5. And fixed a bug where if the player was already sprinting and then became amplified, Speed Booster would not be granted. That is all of the changes in this article, and there will be more changes released in the Season 21 launch day patch notes. As always, there's a link down in the description if you want to read this for yourself. But that is it for this extremely long video, so if you guys enjoyed, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.